So by the time I arrived at Fort Benning, I wasn't searching for purpose. I was searching for order. I didn't understand it then, but structure was the one thing I hadn't been able to build on my own. This episode isn't about toughness. It's not about transformation. It's about what happens when chaos is replaced with expectation and what that demands in return. Let's get into it. Every mission has a beginning, and every journey has a purpose. This is Zeroed In. All right, so I arrived in Columbus, Georgia in the wee hours of the morning in early of October of 90, sometime after midnight. I know it was like super late. Um, my recruiter's instructions before I boarded the flight were to gather my bags from the baggage claim and head straight to the USO desk at the Columbus airport. So standing at the USO desk, there was probably about another 5 or 6 recruits, just like me. The duty driver from Fort Benning had us load our belongings onto the shuttle van and then took us all the way to 30th AG Replacement Center or detachment right there at Fort Benning, specifically Sand Hill. This is the place where recruits go for initial gear, initial issue, standards, indoctrination, and all the immunizations that one can endure for about 10 lifetimes. No kidding. Like, for example, when on immunization day, everybody's just kind of standing there in their underwear in one line, and you just walk right on down the line, both hands down, at your sides. And as you walk through the line or as you're walking down, there's doctors and nurses on either side or whoever, and they've got these air guns. So back then, they used to give you immunizations quickly to like a large group of people with air guns, and they've got small needles in them with the immunization injection in it. So as you're walking down the line, both your left and right shoulders are just getting tapped, with these things that look like, they look like drills, but they're just shooting these, these vaccines into you and everything else. So, if you pull away too fast, some people were left with scarring, permanently on their shoulders. So I don't know if they do that today or not still, but back then that was pretty memorable. So by the end of the first day, everyone looks the same, shaved heads, same uniforms, same packing lists with the same non-Samsonite issued luggage. It's the reception station's job to prepare all recruits for training and get them all ready, prepared for training, I guess, before they're shipped off to the wonderful Shangri-La known as One Station Unit Training, or OSIT, back then. So this is where life gets real. So after a few days of experiencing the, welcome to the family by the drill sergeants and staff, we were loaded onto cattle cars and shipped out to our new homes for about the next 17 weeks for more fun in the Georgia sun. When we arrived, I went through Bravo 332. We were immediately welcomed with open arms and given the red carpet treatment. No, I'm just kidding. There was no red carpet treatment then. Once the cattle car, first let me go back real quick. The cattle cars. If you never knew what, if you may have heard the term cattle car, but it's literally just what I'm saying. It looks like if you were driving down the road and you saw like cattle inside the back of this big trailer attached to like an 18-wheeler truck head, or like horses and stuff. That's exactly. But the things are huge, and they load everybody up, cram them in. You're not sitting down. Everything you have is in there. You're crunched in, just so super tight against everybody, getting really, kind of intimate and knowing each other. But how many more can you fit in a cattle car? One more, at least one more. So The cattle cars, they stopped in front of the company area. The doors opened, and we were just hit with a barrage of intensity, insanity, vulgarity, and rapid firing commands by every drill instructor from all cardinal directions. I have to give it to them though. They were the connoisseurs of swear words, not just the words themselves, but how they were able to use them in a sentence or how they described you and your family at the time. So it was truly remarkable, I guess, to see how the English language could be used in ways I don't think I ever learned in high school. So um, to us, the recruits, everything was happening. Everything that was happening was chaos at best. To the drill instructors, though, it was just controlled chaos. Everything they did was deliberate. There was a method to their madness. Shock and awe were the key for indoctrination. And over the next 16 weeks, inculcation, that would follow. So, however, we were trying to just survive day one. The initial building of the body and mind was paramount for the first couple of weeks. Physical exercise, it was the foundation for both, for building that mind and body. It was used not only to improve individual fitness, but to emphasize the importance of teamwork and its role within inside the military institution. Of course, we didn't know that during the time, and the countless hours and repetitions of push-ups, mountain climbers, flutter kicks, squats, runs, body carries, buddy carries, and so on. You name it, the exercise, we did it. I mean, it was just absolutely pure exhaustion. My weak point, that was running. Although I enjoyed playing sports, as you remembered from episode 1, and participating in physical activities, my endurance for running lasted as long as my body was accustomed to in high school. So, which was about 90 feet for baseball and 200 feet for hockey. So, my first graded PT test in basic training, it was horrible. I performed well, exceeding the standards for push-ups and sit-ups. However, during the 2-mile run, I completed the first mile in about 12 minutes. The standard, I believe, at the time that I aimed for at my age for a 2-mile run was around 15 minutes. So, in the perspective, if I'm taking 12 minutes on the first mile, I got to knock out 3 in the second, even just pass. That was just, needless to say, I had a lot of work to do. And when it came to cardio endurance. So, barracks life, that was a shock. The open bay, it was lined with metal bunks, each with a shared locker for you and your battle buddy, the guy that you were paired up with. Because everybody was paired up with someone. The latrine, which became a new word, because as a civilian, you know it as bathroom. So the latrine, also known as the bathroom, that was wide open as well. There was no expectation of privacy whatsoever. Even the simple decency, which we appreciate, that was stripped away. Remember, they have to strip everybody down to the most common denominator and keep everybody even keel. So the standards for the placement of all your belongings in the lockers, they were, I'll just say there were standards for the placement of everything in your lockers. There were standards for positioning for the linen on your bunk, for the laundry bag that you had to tie at the end of your bunk, and then also for the footwear that went underneath the bunk. So if anyone's tiny little living area, for what little you may have had, if it was out of standard, no matter how minor it was, the entire bay was tossed as if a tornado had just run its course. The time standards the drill sergeants gave for cleaning up everything back up, after they came through the tornado, made the tornado run, everything strewn all over the place. So imagine it, wall lockers knocked over, all the components of it, your items are all over the place. The stuff in your duffel bags dumped all over the place. I mean, everything. Your linen ripped off your bunk. But so the time they had to give us to complete it and to the correct standard, they were like impossible to meet. And that was by design. We were given a mission to meet or exceed the standard through attention to detail, but with time was the stress factor. The time given, that, like I said, it was impossible to meet, but the desired outcome. But as long as the concept of teamwork and accountability existed, we're growing both as individuals and as a team. So they were slowly building it to us, and we didn't know that. So if you look at the time frame, also during the time frame I joined, Desert Shield that had been going underway for about 90 days. It was somewhat oblivious to us since we were right in the middle of basic training. You don't get to watch TV or anything like that. We didn't have any access to the outside world, and I was just still immersed in completing the training. So, since I started in October for the next portion, so you got to understand. So during any given year, TRADOC or Training and Doctrine Command, that's the command that oversees Army courses. It essentially shuts down during Christmas holiday season and sends all recruits home for 2 weeks. So then everyone will return back in early January to complete their training. However, as Desert Shield just threatened to escalate, the Department of Defense at the time, they decided to keep basic training running through the holidays without a break. This was likely due to the U.S. considering overall readiness and war plan contingencies at the time. So we wrapped up basic training, the basic training portion. Like I said, it was a one-station unit training, so it consisted of basic training and AIT. So we wrapped up the basic training portion probably just before Christmas, and then we transitioned into advanced individual training, which is AIT. For us, there was no ceremony, no congratulations, or recognition of achievement. The drill instructors just informed us that, hey, good job, basic training's over, and now welcome to AIT. Now do push-ups. So it was more of like just that, hey, the end of your 9 weeks of the basic is over, but you're not done with us yet, so we got more for you. So to us, there was no delineation between basic training and AIT, except that they now put us into groups, like training groups, based on the MOS we signed up for. So I signed up for the Ranger option, which allowed me to attend Airborne School immediately after graduation, and then proceed through the Ranger Indoctrination Program. Back then, it was known as RIP, to ultimately go on to serve in the Ranger Regiment. So all of us that signed up or that had that type of contract, we fell into one group, while others, like the mortar guys, kind of like I was telling you earlier in episode 1, they kind of fell into another group. We found ourselves in our specialties for training. However, the shenanigans of building mind and body, yeah, that never wavered. So that just continued on for the next, 7 to 8 weeks. So when it came time to graduate from basic training in AIT, I gained probably about a solid 10 pounds. I went from a scrawny, out of shape, 135-pound kid to I'd say reasonably in shape, 145-pound, what I thought back then was a steely-eyed killer, right? But at least that's how, not just me, but how we as a group kind of saw ourselves after enduring probably one of the most hardest challenges of our lives at that point. We did have some people that were in our basic training that were older, in their 20s. I think we had one in his 30s, but the most of us were very young, right out of high school. So my parents came to my graduation, and it was great to see their faces, because after all, I only get to speak with them on the phone on Sundays, and that's only if we were allowed to and if we got a chance. So additionally, as an 18-year-old kid growing up in the environment for which I grew up, That was my first Christmas away from my family, and it definitely wouldn't be my last. Um, I think we graduated on a Friday morning. I didn't spend much time with my parents that weekend because I had to report into Airborne School by 1800 on Sunday, I believe. Being away from my indoctrination home, uh, where I had spent the last 16 weeks, felt almost like I was breaking some kind of rule because you weren't allowed to go anywhere. You were on lockdown for that last 16 weeks, so 17 weeks. Um, to have just a little bit of freedom, that was kind of a strange experience. So when my parents dropped me off at Airborne School that Sunday evening, I remember carrying all that I had with me, my issued duffel bag, up the stairs to the CQ desk, which is the charge of quarters. I showed the NCO at the desk my orders, and he gave me my instructions on where I would be sleeping, where I needed to be the next morning, and the time and the uniform that I needed to wear. So um, this was definitely a change of pace, just from being screamed at and yelled at and called every derogatory name under the sun. But I guess I sort of missed that too. So I had structure and relied upon that to get me through at that time. So besides the drill instructors, the drill instructors at the time, though, they were the authority figures that I looked up to, shaping me to what I had become in such a short time. So I didn't quite fully grasp the big picture at the time, but I owed them a great deal. So you remember back to my shenanigans in episode one, and where I didn't have any drive, I didn't really have a direction. Um, these guys gave me not only just the purpose and the direction, but now the structure. Uh, so now we got into Airborne School. The first week of Airborne School, it's called Ground Week. There's a lot of running and a lot of running in boots. I don't even think you even see your running shoes during that time. So even in the morning for PT, we ran in boots. So you went everywhere. So we received some classroom instruction, but much of the time was spent learning to conduct parachute landing falls, PLFs, in the sawdust pit and in the harness in the PLF trainer pit. So there was this like big structure where they would have harnesses just kind of hung up, and you'd get inside this harness, and it would have all these, other things tethered to the top, and then you'd have people pushing you and moving you around, and then you'd be like on a rope, and you'd be pulled up and then let go, and then you would have to, practice landing by putting your feet and knees together, tucking your arms in, hands up over your face, and then just kind of once your balls of your feet hit the ground, you just kind of, move in like a rolled direction. So we used to work on those during ground week. So on the evening, this was crazy. So I remember on the evening on January 17th of 1991, after training one day, many of us, we were just kind of hanging out in the day room, playing pool, watching TV, because we didn't have those luxuries in basic. So, Airborne School was kind of great for that. I remember that's when CNN announced live from Baghdad that the United States had begun aerial strikes in and around that area. So at that moment, I understood why they kept us in basic training during the holiday season. So it was one of those things where DoD trying to figure out, and like I said, they had to maintain the readiness, and that's why TRADOC didn't let anybody home. So it was only those few weeks later that I had already graduated in Airborne. Now I'm in Airborne School, and now we're watching this live on TV. So that was kind of a unique time. So the second week of Airborne School, it's dubbed Tower Week. This is where we'd build on our training from the previous week, but this time we're jumping out of 34-foot towers while strapped into a harness and then sliding down a long cable, kind of simulating the tasks we would perform once the parachute opens, like, once you leave the aircraft, you kind of go through all those motions. So we were nearing the end of tower week. I think it was like a Thursday, could have been even the Friday. And, I slid down the long cable to the mound at the end, because at the end of the cable, there'd be a big mound and you'd have a couple, airborne candidates. There were other soldiers, but you'd have some other candidates down there. They were kind of on detail. And as people swung down, down the cable, their job was to help catch you at the end. So, so as you go down, they kind of help stop your momentum. And then I remember I just slammed my foot like so hard into the mound, and that was pretty painful. So I ended up walking it off and continued training that day. However, when it came time for us to run back to the barracks, I just felt this sharp pain just shooting through my foot. When we got back to the barracks and I took my boot off, like my foot just swelled out pretty fast. So that'll be another thing that we'll see later on in another episode as well about taking the boot off. So look for that. So we had one more day. Yeah, so it had to have been a Thursday. So we had one more day of tower week before starting jump week. So that following Monday would be going right into jumping out of aircrafts. And then by the end of that week, we'd graduate and move on. So I could feel the end of school. It was coming. It was nearing, before being picked up by the RIP cadre the following Friday. So the last thing I wanted to do was, I did not want to go get my foot checked out at all. Just kind of like one of those suck it up and drive on moments. So the next morning during PT, one of the instructors, they noticed I was trying to keep weight off my foot as we were hitting the ground. And when we got back to the barracks, he had told me I had to go get it checked out. I had to go see the medics. So I knew this would take me out of training for at least a few hours, because everything in the Army's hurry up and wait. So you go anywhere, forget about it. It's going to be a while before you're seen. This kind of sucked because you can only miss a certain amount of hours before being dismissed from the course. And that's in any course you go to. So I was already worried about the little time, I was missing, let alone what the doctor was going to tell me. So I remember the nurse took me back for an x-ray, and they noticed a small fracture in the bottom of my foot. The doctor told me it wasn't enough to put on a cast, but if I continued through the rest of school and then went on the RIP, it'd be probably more than likely I'd be making it worse and eventually be medically dropped from training. So he sent me back to school with the diagnosis and the x-ray to show my chain of command. When I got back to school, I provided the cadre, with those items, and the commander, he looked at them and he told me that my time in Airborne School was done, that it was over. I asked if I could at least become a holdover and join the next class. He told me he'd kind of look into it, see what he could do, because the last thing I wanted to do is leave unfinished with what I had started. So, I was just on that mission to continue training and eventually end up in Ranger Battalion. So I hadn't come this far to not complete my goal. There was already one goal, I didn't meet, and that was prior to joining the Army, and that was playing baseball. So the last thing I want to do is not meet this one. So by the end of the day, I had been called back into the First Sergeant's office for the final decision, and he had informed me that my time in Airborne School was over, and orders had been cut for me to report to Fort Lewis. The needs of the Army were what he had told me. So I was just devastated. Once again, that was just another goal of mine that was short-lived. So my orders had me reporting to Fort Lewis in about a week time. So I'd submitted a leave request to visit my family in Pembroke before reporting back over to Fort Lewis to my new duty station. But with the Gulf War taking shape, I didn't know what, was in store for me in the near future. Um, so before I close out this episode, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that the foundation that my parents had laid for me, to make it, the formation or the foundation, they definitely laid that for me, to help me make it through, during those times. Since I grew up in a household of accountability, I just needed a different type of structure in my life to give me purpose. So at the time, I thought the Army was breaking me down. So just kind of like in perspective. But looking back, it was giving me like the structure I didn't yet know how to build for myself. That structure didn't solve anything, but it gave me a foundation for later on. And foundations, they matter long after the noise, just right long after the noise fades us. So until the next episode, you know, stay aware, stay accountable, stay zeroed in.